All right, everyone. Hey there. Good morning. Welcome back to class. Hope you guys had a good weekend. Just about a minute or so, and then I'll get our lecture going. Um, and we'll just continue to talk about the philosophy of mind today. So, be right back. Hey, Eva. Good morning. Hi, Kelly. Okay. All right, guys. So let's get started. It's pretty much 9. Hi, welcome back, Megan. So everybody here, good to see you guys. Thanks for your attendance and for all of your hard work this term. Basically, today what we're doing is starting by finishing off the rest of the Daniel Stoljar article on physicalism. And then after that, with the time that we do have, as much as we can, we're going to try to cover some of the work of J.J.C. Smart and his article, which is called Sensations and Brain Processes. So let's just resume, and I'll lead you guys into the material by kind of reviewing some of the stuff from the last meeting on Friday. So we're right now discussing the philosophy of mind, which is a topic in philosophy that is interested in questions about consciousness, perception, thought, the mental life of your mind. So what is the nature of consciousness? Is it something that's physical? Is it not physical? There are different perspectives, different arguments about that. So some people are called monists. They believe that the universe and all things within it are made out of just one kind of substance. And the kind of monism that we're mostly looking at here is physicalism. So within physicalism, the belief is that everything is made out of matter, all the way up to the human consciousness. It's all just made out of matter. Everything's just a physical object made out of atoms. And there's two substances that compose and constitute everything. So to the dualist, there's both matter, which is, again, anything extended in space, and the fundamental unit is the atom. And then on the other hand, the dualist also believes that there's the mind, which is not extended in space, and it's just thinking. One argument for dualism was given by René Descartes. And Descartes basically argued that since one thing you know for sure is that you exist, since you're thinking, and that you have an idea of God, there must be a God because the idea has to come from somewhere, and it has to come from something infinite, he thinks, therefore God must exist. But since God is perfect and perfectly good, he would not deceive you when you have clear and distinct perceptions. And one of those is that the mind and the body could exist separately. Basically, I'm skipping a couple of the details, but that was Descartes' dualist argument. Now we're starting to consider the physicalist side of this debate, and we did begin with the work of Daniel Stoljar. So about Stoljar, we're still talking about his material. And the paper from 2005, which is just called Physicalism. Okay, so as the paper begins, he just states a definition of physicalism, which is just the definition that physicalism claims that everything is physical. Everything, not just some things, not just most things, but all things, including consciousness. So it's a thesis about what everything is made out of, and according to this, it's all made out of matter, and we're living in a physical universe, that there are other sciences or that there are other subjects that people study, but in the end, if you're a physicalist, you would say that all of them are indirectly just tied to physics, because everything happening in the universe is just matter accumulating, taking on various forms, and operating according to the physical laws. Now, from there, he introduces two questions pertaining to physicalism. that he says will help us understand it better if we could answer them. And one of those questions he called the interpretation question. And the other question he called the truth question. So the interpretation question is the question, what does it mean to say that everything is physical? Like, how can we interpret the statement and understand exactly what it does mean? So that's the question he takes us through first. After that, we will take a look at the other one, which is the truth question. And the truth question just asks, is it true? Is physicalism true? Is it true that everything is physical? Okay, so now to fully comprehend the answer to our interpretation question, what does it mean to say that everything is physical? We must utilize the concept of supervenience. So that is where we were finished up on Friday, and that's where I'm going to start with resuming the content now. So in Daniel Stoljar's article, we've been directed to this concept, supervenience. Supervenience is a relation that holds between a large structure that is made out of a bunch of tiny little elements or bits. One example of a supervenience concept is a dot matrix image. So what's a dot matrix image? It's a big picture, but it's formed out of a bunch of tiny little dots of ink on a page. So this is a reliable way for you to create images and duplicate them. If you had a standard grid upon which an overlay of individual dots of various colors could be placed, then if you had the ability to duplicate the same dot for dot pattern on the same grid or whatever, then you would have an exact copy of that picture or image. So another example of a supervenience concept would be pixelated images that you see, for example, on these digital viewing screens, either cell phones or computer or television monitors. If you look at them very close, you'd see that there are these little tri-colored panels along the back of your screen, which form the resolution of the screen. And each one of those is a pixel. Depending on how each pixel is illuminated, according to the instructions given to it by the program that's running on your computer, it can therefore project any image or display any photo or any video that another computer with a similar resolution could also show. So whenever you got a big picture that's made out of a bunch of little atomic bits or whatever, then that can be considered a case of supervenience. As an example here, let me draw you this picture. I had a picture sort of like this displayed on the board at the end of the Friday meeting. So I'm trying to make it like a dot matrix looking picture. That's why in drawing it, I'm not allowing the line to just pass through and instead making a series of dots. So although it's not a perfect artwork, it's intended as a scene at the beach where you have waves basically and the sun shining down and some seagulls flying overhead. Now, this big image, let's say, is just constructed out of ever so many individual dots. Here's a little bit of new terminology then, okay, that the author gives. He distinguishes the concept of what's called global features, okay? So, a global feature of a dot matrix or whatever is simply a large-scale aspect of the dot matrix. So it's something that you see in the picture when you zoom out and you look at the big picture instead of looking at individual dots one at a time. So it is a okay, so what it says there, global feature, a quote-unquote big picture aspect of the composite. Okay, now let's employ this terminology and just see if you can work with it pretty easy. In this picture here, in this dot matrix, what could be a global feature of it? Let me ask you that. What is, for example, you seeing the term here and the definition, so applied to this example, what would be a global feature Okay, good. So Eva, the ocean is, for example, one of the global features of it. Or another case, just zooming around on the picture, you could say one of the birds or the sun. Okay, good. So a global feature is a thing that is formed out of the underlying array of elements or dots in this case, right? Right now on your computer screen, the image shown of me is a global feature depicted on the pixelated resolution of your screen. I'm a thing shown on the screen formed out of a bunch of the little pixels, but not one of them individually. Okay, so global features, they're the big picture aspects of the matrices or the composites. Now here's the claim of supervenience. In a dot matrix image, all of the global features, as we use the term supervenience as a verb, they supervene on the arrangement of dots, okay? So, in other words, the big picture is what it is just because of the arrangement of little dots that form the whole picture. And notice this. If you had two of these different dot matrices next to each other, and they were identical in terms of the arrangement and placement of individual dots, so they were dot for dot duplicate. In matrix A, wherever there is a dot of a certain color, that is reproduced exactly in matrix B. And in matrix A, where there is an open space and no dot is placed there, then the same exact fact exists in its counterpart. So, can you understand my question then? If we had a second dot matrix, which was dot for dot identically arranged, then how would the second matrix be looking like in comparison to the first? Question for you, okay? How would the second matrix look if it was a dot for dot duplicate of the original? It would look the same, correct. So it would have all of the same global features. Would there be, in this duplicated matrix, another replica of the ocean waves? Yes. Would there be the sun? Yes. Would there be the birds? Yes. Because what are those things in the first place in this matrix? They're simply a bunch of dots assembled in a given order. So if we reproduce the same order with a second exactly similar pattern, then we would have the same global features. Okay, so just take this then to heart. If there are two dot matrices which have the same dot arrangement, then they will also have all the same global features, because those global, large, big picture features are nothing other than the pattern of the dots. So if the dot arrangements are the same in two cases, then the global features will be the same too. Okay, another question. Suppose that there is a second dot matrix that we compare with this one, but there's something about it that's a little different at the global level. So suppose that in the second case, it's almost all the same, except there's only one bird instead of two. So if there are two dot matrices which have different global features, then of course, because they have different global features, they must also differ in what other fundamental way? Okay, see if you can complete that thought. If there are two dot matrices with the same dot arrangement, okay, they will have the same global features. But if there are two dot matrices which have different global features, then that means that they also therefore must have different what? Different large-scale aspects must mean that, furthermore, they've got different what? Different dots, good. Exactly, Megan. So hopefully this is not lost on you. Two matrices with the same pattern of dots are like carbon copies of each other, and they have all the same global features, like two copies of the same newspaper, with the same photo shown on the front, because they're given the same instructions as to how to imprint dots upon the open grid. But if you have two photos which are different, then, or two, I don't want to necessarily rely only on the example of photos, but if you have two dot matrices that are not the same at the global level, then because they're not the same at the global level, there must be a difference in the distribution and the ordering of dots. Like in one case, there's some dots that are present, and in the other case, they're not. Okay, so if there are difference of global features, there are difference in the patterning of dots. And if there are exact similarity in the patterning of dots, then it will be identical at all larger levels as well. Okay, so now, this becomes a bit of an analogy to the physical universe. Okay, so everything I've said so far in terms of dot matrix pictures and how if you have two side by side with the same elements, then they would also have the same large features. This is now serving as an analogy to the physical universe, okay? So in terms of our physical universe, there are something that's equivalent or a stand-in for the little dots. So if our universe is kind of like a big dot matrix, okay, just take the analogy, then what would be the stand-in or the equivalent of these dots of ink or pixels? So in physical reality, things aren't made out of ink dots or pixels, but they are made out of things. And what would you say is, again, the tiny things? Atoms, correct. Okay, so now grafting this concept onto physical reality, the idea is that physical reality is a big structure, but it's also a composite structure. And the things that exist in reality are made up of little physical atoms. So now the atoms are like the surrogate of the pixels or the dots of ink in the case of the dot matrix. Okay, now what's a global feature of physical reality then? It's something that is formed out of the little atoms. So it's not an individual atom, it's something that the atoms compose when many of them are assembled and arranged together. So can anybody tell me an example of a global feature of the real world? There's lots of examples. So you'll just throw one out there at me, and that'll make sure that you're on the same page with me. Okay, good, Eva. You say a computer, sure. Like even this computer, I would assume you're using one, maybe using a phone. But if you're using a computer right now, the computer that you are using is a global feature of reality because it's a thing that's made out of a bunch of little atoms. And so it would be a water bottle, correct, Megan? And the list doesn't stop there. It's really just any object at all. It's me, it's this cat, it's this table. These are things, yes, but they're built out of parts. And the parts they're built out of, unlike dots of ink or pixels, are rather just atoms. Okay, so what we said about supervenience is that the global features of the dot matrix supervene on the little dots. In other words, if you had two dot matrices with the same order of primary elements, in that case, dots of ink, then they would have to have the same global features as well. Now, this is a concept that is helping to supply you with an idea of physicalism. And the model is supposed to extend to physical reality too. So in the case of physical reality, if we had a second physical universe, okay? Don't let me lose you right there, okay? Can you take that leap of creative thought? Suppose there was another physical universe, like a twin of ours, okay? Suppose that this second physical universe had the exact same arrangement of atoms. So wherever there's a placed atom in our universe, the same exact order exists in the other one. Okay, so if there was a second closed physical universe, and we compared it with ours, and the other one had the exact same placement of atoms, it was an atom for atom duplicate of our universe, then how would the second universe be in comparison to this one? Do you understand this question? So suppose we had not two dot matrices, but two universes, and we compare the second one with ours. The second universe that we are comparing with ours is atomically exactly identical to ours. So if that was so, then how would the second universe be by comparison? It would look the same, correct, Eva? Why? Well, because according to physicalism, everything that exists and every global feature of reality, every event, every object, is nothing other than a combination of a bunch of atoms put together in a particular way. So by hypothesis, if physicalism is true, then if there were, for example, a second physical universe with the same atomic facts, then there would have to be all the same global features in it. So basically, according to physicalism, if you can imagine there would be a second universe which was atomically the same structure as ours, then it would contain all of the same events, including psychological facts. So in this duplicate universe that we are just hypothetically speaking about, would there be another copy of you? Would there be? If there was a universe which was physically the same as ours in terms of the way that the atoms were placed, would there be a copy of you in that case? That's just yes or no. But if you're following the discussion, you should be able to give me the clear answer that what? If there were a physical universe, according to physicalism, which had the same atomic distribution as ours, would there be a copy of you in the universe, in the copy universe? Well, Eva, you said the second universe would look the same, so I think you should be in a position to give me my answer. Yes, the second universe would in fact contain an identical copy of you, because according to physicalism, what you are is just built out of atoms. You're just a physical object. You're just made out of matter. And if we had the same material constitution, then there would be the same exact object and the same phenomena. So it would go all the way down to the things that you think and feel. In this duplicate universe, the copy of you would also be attending a college, something like ours called Chapman. It would be having the same thoughts, experiences, and everything else that you're having. So physicalism denies that you could have physical identity, but psychological difference. So basically your psychology, your thoughts, everything about your consciousness is fully governed and determined by the material constitution of your body and all the rest of the physical universe. Okay, so now we are able to give this concise definition of the supervenience concept. And here's how it's defined by the author Stoljar on page 580. Okay, so he says it as follows. Physicalism is true at a possible world W, just in case any world which is an atomic duplicate of W is a duplicate of W in all respects. Okay, so this is the statement of physicalism in the analysis of Daniel Stoljar. What does it mean to say physicalism is true? Like, because that was the interpretation question. What does it mean to say that everything is physical? What it means to say that everything is physical is to say that everything supervenes on atoms. Everything in the whole universe is just an object that's made out of physical atoms. Consciousness and life forms and biological stuff is no different from that. It's just another physical object. And that is understood by means of this principle, which is that if physicalism is true in our world, in our universe, then that means that any other universe, which was atomically the same as ours, would not just be the same physically, but would be the same in all respects, psychologically, historically, etc. So double checking on your understanding one more time. If we had this, again, hypothetical second universe to compare with ours, and suppose that in the second universe, again, it's like just the same physical arrangement of atoms. In that case, we're talking about the atom for atom copy. Would the copy universe still have the United States Civil War back in the 1800s? Would that still have happened in this physical replica of our universe? What about the assassination of JFK? Or the election of Donald Trump? Or, I don't know, man walking on the moon in 1969? Yes. Okay, I'm just kind of tossing out random historical events that did happen in our world. And what I'm just reminding you of is that according to physicalism, everything that ever happens, the playing out of any event in space and time, is just the playing out of atoms acting according to physical laws of nature. So if there was, again, a second universe which just we hold fixed all the physical facts about the placement and arrangement of atoms, if the natural laws are the same and the physical particulars of each atom is the same, then all the events would happen in the same exact way. So there would be, yet again, in this copy universe, duplicates of every historical episode, right down to the very last detail. Okay, and so yeah, physicalism, if true, at our world means that any other universe, which hypothetically was atomically identical to ours, would be the same in every single way. Now, if a person is a dualist, then they might disagree with that. They might say, well, consciousness isn't necessarily physical. So even if there were, two universes and everything atomically was the same, the mind that thinks and has consciousness is not governed by physical facts. So there could be a duplicate physically of you, but thinking different things. That's what a dualist might argue. But the physicalist says, no, there's no potential for a different thought or conscious state to exist if all the facts of the brain and the physical nature of each atom was the same. But now, I guess, according to this concept of physicalism, we have a better grasp of what the interpretation question's answer is. The interpretation question was, what does it mean to say that everything is physical? Now we can say, well, basically it means that everything supervenes on atoms. In other words, in comparing two composite structures with the same atomic facts, they should have all the same global features as well. Okay, so same atoms, same global features. Different global features in the two cases, there must be difference at the level of the individual elements. Okay, so then there's just one more thing in Daniel Stoljar's essay that we got to finish with, and that is his other question, which was called the truth question. So one of his two main questions in the paper was the interpretation question, what does it mean to say everything's physical? He brings physicalism out and tries to answer that question with supervenience. The other one, though, is it true that everything is physical? Is physicalism true? He thinks so. And now he's going to try and make the case that it is true. But for him to do that, he gives us another argument, okay, to ponder. So this is an argument which he calls the argument from causal closure. Let's make sure to understand that this word does not say casual. That's a common spelling error that I sometimes see returned back to me on the student work. And I can understand because it's a similar spelling, but it's not the same. Casual is C-A-S-U-A-L, but this is the word causal, as in cause and effect. Totally different word, and it's C-A-U-S-A-L, causal. So the argument from causal closure. So here's how this argument really runs. There are three premises in the argument, which then lead to the conclusion. So I'm going to just start by writing the first premise off. And what it says is that every event which has a cause has a physical cause. Okay, so basically all that is saying is that if something happens in this world, in this universe, it's a physical universe, so something physical caused it. Suppose that you go to your car and you're a little sad because you can see that in some heavy winds, a big tree branch has fallen from an overhead tree, landed on your car, and caused a dent in the hood. Okay, so now the dent in the hood is like an event, and it has a physical cause. What's the cause of it? Well, the impact of the force of the branch, which has been taken from the tree through wind or gradual weakening of its bough, and the angle of its path downward is governed by forces of gravity and the wind currents and such, leading to the impact on the car. And we could even go back farther. Why was the limb there? Well, it was because of the gradual physical factors that led to its growth, et cetera, et cetera. So everything that ever happens would seem to have a physical cause. If there was no physical cause, then the thing just wouldn't have happened, if nothing physically happened to make it occur. Okay, so that's just the first premise. Every event that has any cause must have a physical one. The second premise says this: mental events can cause physical events. Mental events can cause physical events. So this is something that we don't normally step back and think about much because we just do stuff and we don't usually think about the control that we have over our ability to do actions. But of course, that control exists. So if I say right now, just for the purposes of an example, hey, hold up these two fingers like that. If I do that, it's because I want to do it. It's because my mind can just command myself to do stuff. So by thinking, I can generate action. Okay, if I want to clap my hands or snap my fingers or something, I can make my body do that. So what's the cause of my body doing these things? Well, my choice to do the action, right? If I say, let me take this cap off of the pen, then it happens. Physically, it happens, right? The cap is like physically off of the pen, but why did it happen? Well, it happened because I did it, but why did I do it? Because I thought to do it, right? So we're all intimately familiar with the ability to just do stuff since we're human beings and we take actions all the time. When you are in a class and, well, I mean, it's been a while since we've been physically in class, right? But imagine that you raise your hand because you want the professor to call on you. Your hand is going up, and that's a physical action of your body. But why is your hand up? What's the cause of that? Well, it's because you had a thought. I want to ask a question. So basically, thought can cause behavior. I could go on and on. A person's playing a sport. They hit a home run in baseball. So that's physically happening. The ball has gone out of the park. Well, why did it happen? Because of the baseball player who hit the ball with a certain skill and timing, right? But why did they do it? Why did that event physically happen? Well, it's because they made a choice that they were going to step up to the plate and try to hit the ball. So physical events can be traced back, when they are involved in human behavior anyway, back to the choices and will of the person who did something. I mentioned the assassination of JFK. Why did he die? What's the cause of death? Well, a gunshot. So you can say, the force of the bullet, etc., is what killed him. Well, why did the bullet? What was the cause of it firing? Well, it's because the firing mechanism of the firearm was triggered by the pressure applied to the trigger mechanism. And then you can say, well, why was that happening? Oh, okay, because a person's finger applied pressure to it as the finger contracted towards the trigger, and that was because of nerve signals sent from the brain to the hand muscles. And then you can ask, well, okay, that's the cause of the hand muscles contracting, but why were the nerve signals sent to the brain? And that's sort of when you run out of explanations other than saying, well, it's because the person had an intention to take the action there, to be the assassin. So, so many examples that I'm giving you, but I hope that they all land on a common understanding, which is that through thought, you can elicit behavior. And the behavior is a physical happening, which is caused by the mental thought, the choice, or the will. Okay? So then there's one more premise to this argument before we get to the conclusion. The third premise is, I would say, like the most perhaps complex, a little technical looking, but it's not too bad once I break it down. But at least at first, bear with me because I'll write it out. It might look a bit confusing just for a moment. But here's what it says. It says, if an event A causes an event B, then in that case, so if A causes, sorry, I did not write the letter. I intended to do that. If an event A causes an event B, okay, just want to get it correctly written. If A causes B, then in that case, there is no other event C, which is different from A and which also causes B. So it says, if an event A causes an event B, then in that case, there is no other event C which is different from A and which also causes B. Okay, so I'm going to help you understand this third premise now. Okay, so as complex or confusing as it may look, at least in terms of how it is worded, it's not saying something that's too hard to understand. All it's saying is this: if something is the cause of something else, it's the only cause. If A causes B, that means that it's just A. It's not also some other thing labeled C in this example, which is different from A and also a secondary cause of B. So more simply stated, what this third premise is saying to us is that for every effect, there are how many causes exactly, and not more nor less. Can you tell me that number? According to the third premise, every effect has exactly how many causes? Yes, good, Megan. Just one. That's all it's saying. If A causes B, it's just A. It's only A, and it's not anything additional or separate from A. Okay, so like when you have an event, there's only one cause of that event, never two or more than one. So now, these three premises, lead to the conclusion of the argument. And I'm sorry to say that in an ideal case, I would have a conclusion written below the third premise. In your own notes, that's where it should go. You draw a horizontal line underneath the third premise statement, and then the conclusion should follow below. But since I've used all my board space, I'm going to have to direct this with an arrow up here to the conclusion. And that's not exactly how the standard form is written in an argument, but you'll do so in your notes. Okay, so here is our conclusion then. From these three premises, what conclusion does he draw? Well, the conclusion is this. That mental events are physical events. Therefore, mental events just are physical events. Okay, so now let me explain how these premises amount to this conclusion. According to the first premise, when an event happens, there's definitely a physical cause of the event. According to the second premise, by thinking, you can cause things to happen. You can just think and then it happens. Like I can think, say the word elephant, and then now I'm saying the word elephant, okay? So like you can think and then something physically can happen as a response to your thought process. Now when the third premise kicks in, it says just this. Well, since every event that has a cause has a physical cause, and since your mind can cause your behavior, that means that when your mind causes your behavior, that's a physical cause. The third premise is called sometimes the exclusion principle, because what it is saying is we exclude any other separate causes aside from the one physical cause. So everything that has a cause has a physical one. By the way, your mind can cause your actions. And then the third premise just says the mind which causes those actions is a physical cause according to premise one, and it's the only cause. The only cause of your behavior is the physical cause. It's not both the brain, but also separate from that, like a soul or a spirit or something else. To suppose that there's more than just the physical cause of your behavior would be to add more causes than is necessary. Because the physical basis of your behavior, your neurology, your neurochemistry, and your brain activity, that is already sufficient to explain the behavior that we see you doing. So if physical explanation is enough to explain why you're doing things, then that's all there is and there's nothing separate from it. Okay, so like we already know that one of the causes of your behavior when you act is brain activity. And the third premise is basically saying, don't think that it's also something that's mysteriously non-physical. The physical cause is the one and only cause of your behavior. How could it be that you both have a brain which causes your behavior, but also something that has nothing to do with the physical brain, which is a separate and entirely independent cause? Okay, so that's the argument. Everything that has a cause has a physical one. When your mind causes your behavior, that's physical too, namely brain activity. And then the third premise merely says that there can't be something separate and different from the brain physical cause. That's the only one. That's the only one that's needed. And that's why he thinks physicalism is true, because there's no room basically in our cause-effect explanation for things to suppose that there's anything other than the physical cause of your behavior. So here I'll read a little bit from the book and you can hear his discussion of the same point. It says here, so the argument from causal closure, this is on page 581. The first premise of this argument is the thesis of the causal closure of the physical. That is, every event which has a cause has a physical cause. The second premise is that mental events can cause physical events. For example, we normally think that events such as wanting to raise your arm causes the event of raising your arm. The third premise is the exclusion principle. And it says, and this is his wording, I changed it a little bit, but if event E causes event E star, then there is no event E hashtag such that E hashtag does not supervene on E, and E hashtag causes E star. So to kind of use a little less terminology or symbolism, I just went with A, B, and C. If A causes B, then it's just A, and it's not also anything separate from A. The conclusion of the argument is that mental events supervene on physical events, or more briefly, physicalism is true. Because if the thesis of causal closure is true, then behavioral events have physical causes, and if mental events cause behavioral events, then they must supervene on the physical if the exclusion principle is true. Okay, so anything you do from the biggest to the smallest behavior is caused by the physical attributes of your brain at that time. And the third premise is just saying there can't be something other than the physical brain which causes your behavior. Otherwise, we would be multiplying causes beyond what's necessary. A physical cause is sufficient to explain it. So why and for what reason would a person say there is both a brain, but also something completely not physical, which is also responsible for your actions? Okay, now, this is one of his big arguments that physicalism is true. And that's the most important one that he does give, the argument from causal closure. But he also states one further one at the end to sort of give you two different dual bases of support for physicalism. So really quick, I'll just run through the other argument, which is considerably much more straightforward. Even though it's simpler, I don't find it to be as interesting or convincing. But here is the other one, and it's just called argument from methodological naturalism. Okay, so this argument from methodological naturalism simply says that it is rational, it is reasonable to believe what is believed by the methods of science. Okay. Okay, all that says, just to repeat it, it is rational, in other words, reasonable, to believe what is believed by the methods of natural science. So all that's saying is that if you follow the lead of the consensus views in natural science, then that's reasonable. Because science is reasonable, the whole enterprise of science is to give testable explanations for observed facts. So scientists can't just say, hey, I've got a wild opinion and no proof, but this is what I think or feel today. That's not science. Science requires that you have data, empirical evidence, and that can be replicated experimentally. So it's hard to deny, at least at a minimum. I mean, some people don't like the conclusions that science reaches. Fair enough, I guess, but you can't really say with much credibility that science is just totally unreasonable and irrational. Like, people don't pay attention to evidence or common sense or anything like that. So it's at least rational to believe whatever science does. And the second premise just adds to that by saying, well, physicalism is believed by the methods of natural science. So I think you can probably deduce the conclusion here of this argument. It's not too tough. The first premise, it's reasonable, it's rational to believe what's believed by natural science. Premise two, physicalism is believed by the methods of natural science. So what do you think, therefore, will be this conclusion statement? If these two premises are given, then the conclusion that would follow from them logically would just be that what? rational to believe what's believed by natural science. By the way, they believe physicalism. So what follows? Can we say it? What does a person conclude from these two statements? There's some information that follows from them. Good, Megan, that it is thus rational to believe physicalism. Therefore, it is rational to believe physicalism. There you go. So a simple argument in a lot of ways. It's just saying, hey, scientists are reasonable. So if you follow their lead and believe what they believe, you'll be just as reasonable too. And in addition to this, physicalism is the belief that is the consensus belief of physical science. So if it's reasonable to follow science and believe what is believed in science, and if physicalism is believed in science, then it's reasonable for you to believe that also. Now, this is a second approach for trying to make the case that physicalism is true, and we can compare the quality of this argument with the one just mentioned, the argument from causal closure. To me, if it's just my own opinion, I think that the causal closure argument, while a little more tricky and detailed, is a better argument rationally than this one, because although they're both trying to reach the same conclusion, physicalism is true, you should believe it, this one, I think, tells you defer to the expert beliefs of people in the field in science, but don't you think about it on your own or figure out the independent reasons why it's true. It's just sort of like scientists are reasonable, follow their lead, but I find that a little less intellectually gratifying than an argument which tries to at least give you a reason to think of for yourself as to why physicalism is perhaps true. And that's the causal closure argument, because it is saying, well, if you think about it, every effect just has one cause. And we already know that your brain is a real cause of your behavior. So there can't be something other than that. It's just the brain. So this idea that there's only one cause for each effect and that everything in the universe has a physical cause, that I think is a little bit more substantial, and it gives you a reason to think that physicalism is true. Whereas in this case, we sort of outsource the intellectual labor to presumed, rational and smart scientists, which of course they are, but it's better, I think, to be given an actual reason than to think, oh, there's like this black box of intellectual activity and whatever comes out of it is rational, so you should just follow along. Yes, we do have to defer to the expertise of people that are more specialized in all kinds of fields, whether that's medicine, science, or other, industry even. But we're also reasonable people who can think on our own, so I think it's good to be told what reasons are in favor of an argument instead of just being said, well, the preponderance of rational opinion lies with that view, and therefore you should just accept it as well. I would rather accept a view once I understand the underlying basis for it, instead of just being told others have determined that, and therefore they're so rational that you should simply adopt their views as well. Okay, so today's meeting has really just been all about concluding and going over the remaining topic or the remaining material in Daniel Stoljar's essay called Physicalism. Now, as we move on to Wednesday, we have another article to cover, and there will be two more on this philosophy of mind topic, so I might have to push the first lecture on the next topic to when we get back from our Thanksgiving break. But if that's needed, that's fine, and I'll make edits to the calendar later. But for the next meeting, we're going to read and talk about J.J.C. Smart, Sensations and Brain Processes. And you should also, if you want to read ahead a little and make sure you're on top of it, take a look at that Alan Turing article, Computing Machinery and Intelligence. We're definitely going to cover at least those two this week. But for sure, next time, it's J.J.C. Smart to start us off. So read that, if nothing else, for the Wednesday lecture. And I guess we're probably going to be good. I know there's a few minutes left in the meeting, but I don't want to launch into another author or essay with only a couple of moments to get it started. So last word about Stoljar. Stoljar defends physicalism, and he also tries to give us a clear interpretation of what it means. Physicalism, he starts the paper by saying, just means everything is physical. And, well, what does it mean to say that everything is physical? He directs us towards supervenience to get our answer. It means that everything supervenes on atoms, that everything in the whole universe is just made out of physical atoms, even us in our consciousness. Supervenience implies that if there are two identical arrangements of elements, then they're going to have the same large-scale global features as well. So in terms of the physical universe, if there was another one with the same atomic facts, then that would completely govern all larger scale phenomena, including consciousness. So in a duplicate physical universe, everything's the same. Now, to the truth question, there were these two arguments, one causal closure, one methodological naturalism, both trying to make the case that physicalism is actually true. We might not agree with those arguments, or we might find fault with at least one premise in some of them, but now at least you understand what the case is and what reasons people have for taking that view. So wherever you stand on the debate, we're still developing it a little more, and we're going to move on next time to talk about the next article on this, which is JJC Smart. So all right, guys, I guess I'll let you go for now. Have a great day, and hopefully your day's off to a good start so far. Take care and come back on Wednesday, and make sure to keep attending. I want those attendance numbers to stay up. So, I'm probably not talking to the right people right now, but you that are watching this at any later time, you really should just get up in the morning and just, get up and watch the lecture at 9. Okay, see you guys then. Take care. Bye-bye.